intent, had the means, and we were able to intervene and get them to safety and get a safety plan established and save their life. Did you hear those 3 examples?
Yes, we got that.
Okay, the last slide was just mine and Dr. Kopac's contact information, and then an opening for any questions.
Okay, I will, if it's okay, I'll put your email addresses in the box, or you guys are welcome to put it in the message box so they can contact you. Does anybody
download the PowerPoint? It's there in the last slide.
Okay. For anyone that we don't have a PowerPoint showing right now, but you can download the PowerPoint. It is available in Module 2 in the Readings folder. You can download it there. And their contact information is at the end of the presentation. Or you can email me and I'll send it to you. Does anybody have a question for Chaplain Price or Dr. Kopac?
If there are no questions, if anyone prefers, I'm also happy to reach out directly over email, share some papers, thoughts, musings, etc. I'm absolutely happy to respond directly or here in the group. So please, I relish this dialogue. It's wonderful.
So Chaplain Jabron wondered if you guys would be interested in doing a training for the staff in Salt Lake City. He thinks this will be important.
Appreciate the invitation. It's by training for staff. You mean for chaplaincy staff, or more broadly, what would you like to see done?
He said suicide is a huge area in their state, so probably training for the chaplains.
Yeah. Can you hear me? I just took myself off mute.
Yep, we can hear you guys.
Okay. Hey, Nadia, one of the biggest things is we have such a small population, and we have one of the largest rates of suicide in the entire country per capita. A lot of what we see is because there's such a high influence of one specific faith tradition here that is not accepting of same-sex attraction, things like that, anything to do with LGBT. What we find is kind of like an inner conflict that these people, these veterans go through. I don't know if it's a sensitivity training that we need but some of the things you've been presenting, it's really hitting home. And if our staff understood, maybe it would make a difference is what I think.
Now, one of the questions that we have is, when you say our staff, do you mean your chaplain staff, or do you mean your mental health staff?
Sir. What I'm kind of envisioning is we have these monthly trainings that are optional to attend, and what we can do, if we put one of these together and have you guys be the presenters, we could do it over Skype, in one of our meeting areas, and invite our social workers and our, some of the nurses that can get there, that kind of thing, just to kind of put it in the forefront, that this is an issue, because honestly, we can make an impact. I really think we can, and having the chapel staff here kind of, I don't know if it would be lead the way, but I think that they see us being accepting, that would make a difference.
One of the things we did at our facility is I worked with our EEO and our diversity and inclusion group, and so we offered what we called a safe zone training. And so it was available for our chaplain staff as well as for anybody else within our facility to train on those on LGBT issues, and also for spiritual aspects of it. So that's something I'll be happy to share. But we actually worked with our EEO department to develop that and to lead the way in that. So that's something that you could also reach out and do, is collaborate with them.
Yeah, let me do that, and then once I get in contact with them, is it okay if I send you all some emails and just kind of see at least what information I can get from you?
Absolutely.
All right, awesome. Thank you.
Now, to speak specifically to the inner conflict that veterans will have around LGBTQ issues. And I know that we have a module about that, so I don't want to speak too much about that, but just be aware that there are some very significant injuries that the LGBTQ population incurred that others would not incur in the don't ask, don't tell, don't pursue cultures of the military, in addition to the religious and spiritual cultures that they're coming from.
Right.
And that's something we really have to provide care for. From the religious and spiritual side of things, one of our challenges as chaplains may be some chaplains' own personal convictions, their own personal theology may be in conflict with care, and that's something that the chaplain team needs to have a conversation about. The chief chaplain needs to be aware of. There certainly needs to be a culture where every veteran receives care regardless of their preferences, their orientation, their gender identity, their identified gender, any of those things, regardless of what a chaplain's own personal theology is. Every veteran deserves dignity, respect, and the same care as any other veteran. And it's important, if you're going to be a federal chaplain, that you are willing and able to provide care to every single veteran, regardless of anything about their background that may be different from you. Another issue on that then is these veterans who, when their own personal theology and their beliefs are in conflict with who they are attracted to, with what gender they are attracted to. That may be some of this negative religious coping that we were talking about earlier. There is a higher suicide rate among the LGBTQ community. There is higher incidence rates of intimate partner violence because of these extra wounds that they incur from their own culture, from the military culture, from their religious or spiritual background. And one of the things that chaplains can do, while you have to be very careful when you do this, that you do not cross the line of proselytizing or influencing what they believe.
Yeah.
It is perfectly within the realm of what chaplains do to help the veteran process what they believe and where it comes from. Before I was a chaplain, I was the director of a counseling agency. And this counseling agency, we worked with sexual trauma survivors. We worked with sexually addicted persons, people with sexual dependencies. Very often we worked with unwanted same-sex attraction and gender dysphoria, issues like this. And one of the things that we ran into, and I've continued to run into it here in the VA, is that a person's spiritual background, or their theology, they could say that, God hates homosexuals. I'm an abomination because I like other men, and so God hates me and he's going to send me to hell, but he made me this way, and so now I don't understand God. Well, if I go to my own sacred text and I try to find where this idea comes from, I may be surprised by what I don't find. Yeah. Or I may be surprised that it doesn't say that I'm an abomination, that it says the activity is, or something like that. And then if the chaplain were to ask me questions about what does this mean to me, how do I interpret this, what meaning does this interpretation then lend to my life, things like this, my feelings about myself may change. And frequently that's what I saw in private practice. That's what I've seen with the veterans here. Some people continue to have unwanted same-sex attraction. Some people accept their same-sex attraction as part of who they are and can harmonize that with their theology. And again, that's okay for chaplains to help people process. We can do that all the time. We just can't tell people what to believe. We can't judge. We can't shame. We can't influence or steer people to believe a certain way. And so it's a fine line you have to be very careful with, but there's a lot of really, really good ministry we can do in that area if we're willing to do so. Sorry, you got me on one of my soapbox issues.
I just want to throw out there for anyone that is interested, we've been doing a spiritual recovery and moral injury group specifically for the LGBT community here at our facility since October. And
That's awesome.
And so we have some materials, if you would like, that I've been developing and using. One of them is a spiritual injury and moral injury questionnaire that kind of looks at some of those issues that an individual may have because of their spiritual beliefs and their gender identity, their sexual orientation, or because of their sexual trauma, whether that's childhood, adult, or military sexual trauma. And so that's a resource for you if you would like to use it.
I see another question about from Estrada. What do you say to the vet if he asks a question about those successful suicide of whether they are going to hell? So I've had patients that one of their only protective factors were that they were afraid they would go to hell. And I really did not want to remove that belief because that was really all they were holding on to at the time. And so just to be aware, that may be an issue that you don't want to delve into or you want to really tread lightly until the patient's in a better place. Different religious systems have different opinions. Some theologies, it's been declared that, the person commits suicide, they go to hell. And others, it's just what grandma told them or their Sunday school teacher told them, and they believe in what is in their sacred text, but it's not in there. And so, again, just like some of these other, what I call dysfunctional theologies, that when a person's theology harms them, regardless of what their belief is, regardless of what their religious background is, if their theology is harming them and making their life worse, I call that dysfunctional. When you're dealing with a dysfunctional theology, helping a person to be able to articulate where this belief comes from and what meaning it holds for them. And if they can take it out and look at it from different angles, they may very well change what their belief is if they have to have it grounded in a certain sacred text or certain tradition, and their belief just isn't congruent with that. So, again, we can't proselytize, we can't change a person's theology based upon our own beliefs at all. But we can help a person to explore why they believe what they believe and where that comes from. I know that's maybe too vague. Ask another question if you need more clarification on that. Kristen, do you see any other questions we haven't answered yet? Trying to scroll through the conversation.
I'm trying to think. So no, I think we've covered all of the questions that we have so far. For anyone that's looking for other resources, for those of you that are familiar with Susan Lyons, she talks about core needs. And so a lot of the issues that we've been talking about with suicide and with moral injury and even with the LGBT population are the core needs that every individual has, no matter what their spiritual tradition or spiritual practice is. And so that would be a good resource. It's called the Diakrisis Method, and I'll upload that as well. For those of you that would be interested in using it, I found it to be very helpful. No matter what a person's individual faith journey has been, it's a good place to put us all on common ground and start, and to look at even issues of safety and trust and how it helps me to understand my issue of dignity, acceptance, self-acceptance, my issues with community and belonging. Those are some things to think about. So, but I don't think there have been any other questions. Thank you for asking.
I see. Are we out of time, Kristen?
Well, we have gone over due to technical issues, but we have time for one or two more.
I see one question from Chaplain Chambers in Orlando. It says, do you take into consideration the beliefs of the ecclesiastical endorsement groups? I'm assuming that has to do with LGBTQ. So answering it from that perspective, as a chief chaplain, I absolutely take into consideration my chaplain's endorsers and what they're able to do or not able to do. That does not apply to caring for a veteran, providing clinical chaplain care, working with a suicidal veteran. No endorser can say that my chaplains can only work with our faith group, or my chaplains can only work with people who have this gender preference or this gender identity, because they're endorsing chaplains to work in the federal government. And so that's not the way it works. That would be a violation of the patient's rights. And so I expect all of my chaplains, regardless of what their personal theology is, to serve all of our veterans with dignity and respect, and to serve them all equally. Now, where the endorsing groups come in is like if it was requested for us to perform a wedding, I would not expect one of my chaplains from a faith group that does not recognize same-sex marriages. I would not expect one of those chaplains to perform the wedding ceremony. It's reasonable to have another chaplain do that. That would be crossing the line and violating their conscience. But again, that's a sacred ritual or a sacred rite. That's not a provision of clinical care. And so that's where I draw the line, and that's really the only place we can draw the line for taking into consideration a chaplain's personal theology. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Chaplain Price. I think that was very well articulated. We have time for one more. Does anybody else have a question? Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Do you encourage them to transgender to the point of surgery? We'll let that one be our last question for the day. Chaplain Price or Dr. Kopax?
I'm sorry, I don't think I understand the question correctly. What sort of encouragement are we talking about?
I'm not sure. I'm just reading the question that popped up.
I see it as well. I'm not. You know what? I'm sorry. I'm going to have to respectfully decline to answer that question because I just don't really understand what's being asked here. I understand VA offers services, clinical support to transgender veterans. So there are absolutely supportive options available within VA to transgender veterans. I see here, elaborating on the question, they are lost in their identity and wanted to transgender to perform sex change surgery. Thank you for that clarification. Please forgive me, I don't feel empowered to answer that specific question. What I do know is, as I mentioned, VA does provide services to transgender veterans. They do have clinical service options here. From what I understand, VA does not refund, pay for, or perform gender reassignment surgeries. That is done on the veteran's own, in his or her own capabilities, but other clinical services are provided. So please forgive me that I wasn't able to provide a more detailed answer.
And we'll go into that later on. We have a further module on LGBT issues coming up in a couple weeks, and that includes a large, healthy portion of it to transgender and to it kind of going into those issues and explaining about it. With that in mind, I do want to thank you, Dr. Kopax and Chaplain Price, for all of your time today. And if anyone else has a question that they would like to ask them, feel free to email it, post it in the classroom site under everything you wanted to ask about. And we will send it on to them so we can or you can contact them directly if you use their contact information at the bottom of their presentations.
Thank you, everyone, for this opportunity. I really appreciated it, and as well as the sidebar discussions. Very, very insightful, and I'm grateful to all of you.
All right, you guys have a fabulous day. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kristen. We'll see you later.